The Greeks feared a great many monsters, serpents that never slept, bulls that breathed fire, soldiers that rose, fully armed and already hating, out of plowed earth. But the creature they remembered with the coldest dread was none of these. She was a young woman, a king's daughter, a girl who fell in love. This is the story of Medea, how a princess gave away everything she had for the man she chose, and what she became when he took it all, and then asked her to be reasonable about it. At the eastern edge of the known world, where the Black Sea runs out into the lands of the dawn, lay the kingdom of Colchis. Its king was Aeetes, and his father was Helios, the sun himself. In a grove sacred to the war god, guarded by a serpent that never closed its eyes, hung the kingdom's great treasure, the Golden Fleece. The king had a daughter. Her name was Medea. She was a priestess of Hecate, goddess of witchcraft and the dark of the moon. She knew the language of the herbs and the uses of poison. She knew which root could heal a wound and which could stop a heart. She was clever in a way that frightened careful men, and until the ship came, she had never once disobeyed her father. And then the ship came, the Argo, and with it, Jason. He had sailed half the world to take the fleece home and claim a throne that had been stolen from his family. He walked into the king's hall and asked for the treasure plainly, as though it might simply be handed over. Aeetes smiled the way powerful men smile when they have already decided to say no.
You may have the fleece, stranger, once you have earned it. In the field of the war god I keep 2 bulls. Their hooves are bronze and their breath is fire. Yoke them, plow the field, and then sow it with these, the teeth of a dragon, and reap whatever comes up.
What came up from dragon's teeth was an army, a whole harvest of armed men, born from the soil and born furious. No one had ever survived the king's challenge. Aeetes said it precisely because it could not be survived. But the gods had already taken sight, and so the goddess of love loosed her son's arrow, and it struck Medea in the heart. The love that opened in her was not gentle. It came all at once, and it felt less like joy than like a wound she could not close.
He will be dead by tomorrow's dusk. The bulls will burn him where he stands, while the earth-born men will cut him down. And I will watch it happen, and something in me will go into the ground with him. Why should I care whether a stranger lives or die? He is nothing to me. He is a foreigner who wants my father's gold. And yet I would give my father's gold, and my father's grove, and my father's name, only to keep him breathing one more day. What is wrong with me? What have they done to me?
She went to him in the dark, the way the betrayal of a great house always begins, quietly and by someone trusted.
Listen to me. and you will live. I have an anointment. Anoint your body with it, and your shield, and your blade. And for one day no fire will burn you, and no edge will cut you. When you have plowed the field, and the earth-born men rise up, do not raise your sword to them. Throw a stone, a single stone, into the middle of their ranks. They will not see whose hand it was. They will turn on one another, and they will do your tilling for you. I can give you the bulls, I can give you the soldiers, I can give you the serpent, and the fleece, and your throne. But I want something in return.
Name it. Anything I have is already yours.
Take me with you, make me your wife, and swear it, now, by every god who might be listening.
Then I swear it, by Hera and by all the gods of Greece, I will take you home and make you my wife, and honor you all the days of my life, and I swear it.
He swore. Hold on to that. Whatever else you forget of this story, remember that he swore, freely, by the gods, while she was still close enough to walk away. And then it all came true. The bulls were yoked, the field was plowed, the stone fell among the sown men, and they cut each other to ruins in the furrows. But Aeetes never intended to keep his word either, fleece or no fleece. So in the last of the dark, Medea led Jason to the sacred grove, and she sang the sleepless serpent to sleep, the first thing in the world it had ever done. And Jason lifted the golden fleece from the oak. And Medea, princess of Colchis, granddaughter of the sun, turned her back on her father's house and her father's gods, and ran for the ship that would carry her away from everything she had been. Aeetes did not let his daughter go quietly. He launched his fleet and gave chase. And at the head of the pursuit sailed his own son, Medea's younger brother, Absyrtus. What happened next is the part the old poets lowered their voice to tell. To buy the Argo time, Medea turned on her brother. In the oldest telling, she killed him and cut his body apart and scattered the pieces into the sea behind them. Because she knew her father, she knew that a king who was also a grieving parent would stop to gather every last piece of his son, to give the boy a burial, and he did. The hunt slowed while the father wept over the water. Their escape was paid for in her brother's blood. This is the thing to understand about Medea. Long before the end, there was no line she would not cross for the man she had chosen. She did not learn that at Corinth. She proved it on the body of her own brother, while she was still a girl and still in love.
I have no father now, no brother, no country, no way back. There is only you and the sea, and what we do next. So you had better be worth it, Jason. You had better be worth all of it.
They came home to Greece, to the kingdom that should have been Jason's. But his uncle Peleus sat on the throne, and had no intention of giving it up to a nephew with a sheepskin and a foreign bride. So Medea solved the problem the way Medea solved problems. She went to the daughters of Peleus, devoted girls who loved their aging father, and she showed them a wonder. She took an old ram, worn out and gray, and she cut it apart and set the pieces to boil in a cauldron with her herbs. And out of the steam leapt a young lamb, alive, new made. The girls watched their father's old age dissolve before their eyes, and they began to hope.
You love your father. You should give him back his youth. If you could, wouldn't you? You have just seen that it can be done. So do exactly as I did. Be brave. Don't flinch at the knife. The hard part lasts only a moment, and then he is young again.
And so the daughters of Peleus took up the knife against the father they loved, and cut him apart, and set him to boil, and waited for a young king to rise, laughing out of the pot. He did not rise. Medea had taught them everything, except the one herb that mattered. She had let them murder their own father with their own hands, for nothing. It was too much, even for a kingdom hungry for a new king. Jason and Medea were driven out, exiles with blood on the family name. And they wandered until they came at last to the city of Corinth. And here, for a while, there was something that almost looked like peace. Years went by. 2 sons were born to them. The terror of Colchis, the woman who had unmade 2 royal houses, became a wife in a foreign city, raising children in a language not her own, waiting for a husband at the door. And then Jason found a better offer. The king of Corinth had a daughter, Glauce, and no son to follow him. A marriage to the princess meant a crown, and Jason, who had once sworn by every god in Greece, decided that the wife who had given up the world for him was now an inconvenience standing between him and the throne. He decided to tell her himself, and he had the nerve to call it wisdom.
Be reasonable about it. I'm not doing it against you. I'm doing it for all of us. Marrying into the royal house secures everything we never had. Our sons grow up with royal brothers. We are never exiles or beggars again. You, of all people, understand a useful arrangement. You made a few yourself.
Useful. I betrayed my father for you. I killed my brother for you. I put the knife into the hands of Peleus' daughters and let them butcher him. For you. I have no homeland to return to, no name, no family, living that will own me, because of you. And now you stand in the house I keep for you, and tell me you are taking a young bride because it is useful.
The gods know I have always been grateful for what you...
Don't. Do not thank me. You swore an oath, Jason. By Hera, by all of them. You stood close enough to touch me, and you swore. Where are those gods now? Do you imagine they have stopped listening just because it has become inconvenient for you?
He expected her to weep and rage, and then go quiet, the way betrayed women were supposed to, in his experience. He genuinely did not understand the person he had married. He never had. That was always the trouble with Jason. He only ever saw the version of Medea that was useful to him. The king of Corinth understood her better. Creon came to her himself, and he came afraid.
You will take your sons and you will leave Corinth. Today, I know exactly what you are, Medea. Clever and patient, and very slow to forgive. I have heard how you treated the houses that have wronged you. I will not have you breathe in this same air as my daughter. Go, now.
Grant me one day, only one, long enough to ready my children for the road, since their father can be troubled too. One single day. What harm can one grieving woman do in the space of a day?
It was the most expensive act of mercy a king ever granted. He gave her the one thing she needed and mistook it for kindness. And then fortune handed her the last piece. Through Corinth that very day passed ages. The king of Athens, old, heartsick, and childless, traveling in search of an answer to that grief. Medea, who knew the secret arts, promised him children. He promised her something far more valuable.
If you can reach Athens, you will have my protection. Whatever you have done, whoever comes asking, in my city you will be safe. You have my word on it.
And that changed everything. Until that moment, Medea had been a trapped woman, and a trapped woman is only desperate. But a Medea with an open door behind her, a place to run, a king's promise of sanctuary, that was a different thing entirely. Now she was free to do anything at all. So she became, for one afternoon, the woman Jason had always wanted her to be. She sent for him. She lowered her eyes. She apologized.
You were right. I was a foolish, jealous woman. Go to your bride with my blessing. Only let our son carry her a gift for me, so she will think kindly of them, and let them stay in this city near their father. A crown woven of gold, a golden crown, heirlooms from the house of my grandfather, the sun.
Jason was delighted. Of course he was. He took the boys by the shoulders and walked them up the palace himself. The proud father, representing the children and the beautiful gift to his new beautiful wife. He had no idea what was woven through that gold. The princess could not resist them. She slipped on the golden crown. She set the crown upon her hair. She turned before the mirror, delighted with herself. And then the gold began to burn. It was a fire that water would not touch, and it would not stop. And it took her where she stood. Her father, running to save her, caught her in his arms, and the fire took him too. Two bodies lay tangled together on the palace floor. And word ran back through the streets of Corinth. The foreign witch had kept her promise after all. But Medea was not finished. There was one wound left to give, the deepest one, the one a man never recovers from, the one that would leave Jason hollow for the rest of his days. And it was the only one that would cost her as much as it cost him. She stood at the door of her own house. Her two sons were inside.
If I leave them behind, Trion's people will come for them. They will make my children pay for what I have done. They will die frightened, in a stranger's hands, for their mother's crime. I cannot allow that. I will not allow that. And if they must die, then let it be by the hand that brought them into the world, and not by an enemy's. Oh, but their faces. Look at them. My heart, don't do this. Take them with you. Let them live. Let them be your comfort in exile, your one good thing. No, and leave them here, for my enemies to murder and laugh over? Leave my children to be someone else's revenge? I will not be laughed at. Not by him. Not by anyone. Not anymore. Forgive me, or I am going. You cannot follow.
She went inside, and she closed the door behind her.
Mother, mother, no.
And then the house was silent. Jason came running through the streets. Too late, far too late. Having heard what waited for him at home, he threw himself against the doors of the house, shouting for his sons, beating on the wood until his hands bled. And then he heard her voice, and it came from above him. He looked up. There, on the roof of the house, sat Medea, in a chariot drawn by winged serpents, sent down to her by her grandfather, the sun. The bodies of their 2 sons were with her. He could not reach them. He would never even be allowed to bury them.
You monster, you hateful, impossible thing. There is no woman alive who could have done what you have done. No beast, no fury out of the pit. You have destroyed me. You have torn out everything I had.
Yes, I have reached your heart at last. It was the only part of you left that I could still wound. You broke your oath, Jason, and you laughed while you'd get it. You will not laugh again. You will grow old with no bride, no sons, no house, no name worth keeping. And one day, when you are nothing and no one, a beam from your own rotting ship will come loose and strike you down. Carry that with you until then.
And the serpents climbed into the air and carried her away towards Athens, beyond his reach, beyond the city's justice, beyond any punishment the world had a name for. The Greeks told this story for 1,000 years, and they did not tell it because Medea was a monster. They told it because she wasn't, not at the start. She was a young woman who loved without holding anything back, and was betrayed without mercy, and answered in the same coin she had been paid in. Look back at it, and you'll find that every terrible thing she did at the end was first a gift she had given Jason at the beginning. She had given up her father. She had given up her brother. She had given up her home, her gods, her innocence, her place in the world, and asked, in return, that he kept one single province. He didn't. And so the old storytellers left one question hanging in the dark, and they were content to never answer it. The girl who stepped into the ship at the edge of the world would never have recognized the woman in the serpent chariot. So which of the 2 of them, in the end, made the monster? This is the tale of Medea.